My name is Cherry Steinweider. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called the Center for the Healing of Racism. I am also one of the individuals that gave birth to this organization 26 years ago. One of the things that I am very grateful for, that I was able to tell that truth and speak about a very painful subject that a lot of people do not want to talk about, and they haven't run me out on a rail yet. The way that we have been able to have these conversations is that we are entering into a space to examine our own racial conditioning. And when I could get with anyone, say, gee whiz, can we get together and explore our racial conditioning? Because everybody in this country have been conditioned to play out this us and them. Not only that, at our very beginning of this organization, it was very clear to us, the founders of this organization, which were very diverse, that everybody in this country have been damaged in one way or another around racism. That everybody in this country have been hurt around this thing called racism. And it really doesn't matter how white your skin is or shades of brown. And if that is the truth, we need to find spaces that we could come together to explore and to help heal from the damage of racism. That's the reason we called ourselves the Center for the Healing of Racism. I think it's a conversation that we have not talked a lot about, especially talking about racism across ethnic lines. Sure, as a person of African descent, we talk about it all the time among ourselves, but to enter into arena and be able to really talk about it in a very transparent way with people that look different from us is something that I think is so needed. I think all of us need to be in a space that we hear each other's stories. We need to come clean about everything we've participated, everything we've done in this thing, how we were set up to act out whatever it is we're acting out. And in these spaces, we could look at how we participated or been a part of sexism, racism, homophobia. These conversations are critically important. Dialogue Racism is an 18-hour workshop. It starts with defining racism and prejudice, how racism is perpetuated, and then we look at the many manifestations of racism. Because a lot of times, just to say racism, people don't have a real grasp of what this is. So what we were able to do is to break that word down, pull it apart, pull this racism apart, look at the many manifestations of racism. And out of that we found unaware racism and white privilege, with good people do and say all the time to keep racism in motion. And I've often said, I think this is the most deadly and the most toxic form of racism. The reason being, you see, I don't have to interact with the KKK or any one of those 1,000 organizations or these hate groups, but I have to interact with good people all the time. And if their racism is so unaware, this is where I get the majority of my hits from. It's not the KKK or the neo-Nazis. But then on the flip side of that, it is internalized racism, and how people that are targeted by racism with all of those negative jokes and stereotypes and negative stereotypes begin to believe that's our reality. And once we believe it, we act it out on people that look just like us. But then cultural racism, stereotypes is a form of racism, institutionalized racism, environmental racism, where poor neighborhoods of color become the dumping ground for all of the toxic waste. Environmental racism. So in order to be able to really understand racism, we take people through this process over 2 full days or one night a week for 9 weeks. and it's called Dialogue Racism. Many people will never enter into these workshops for fear that they would be called a racist. In 26 years of doing this work, working with this organization, we have never ever called anyone a racist, not even one time. Even the nature of the name of the organization, the Center for the Healing of Racism. How can I invite you into a space and talk about healing and re-traumatize you calling you a negative name? So that don't fly. Some of the obstacles, other than the fear, and I think the fear is still the greatest. Another obstacle would be, you see, we are not used to really giving our soul to people we don't know. We can walk into a space and we could give a lot of conversations from our head, but to be able to move that conversation to your heart where you can really feel it, that is one of the obstacles. The other obstacle is that I don't think that we have enough of these conversations going on. In order to be able to reach, and say it took me 26 years to reach 100,000 people. It's not enough of these conversations going on. That's an obstacle. The other obstacle is I don't think this country's been very serious about doing anything about racism, because if it was, the money and the resources would be there. If you want to show up and do this type of work, silence is no longer an option. For you to stay silent and let racist jokes, racist stereotypes, sexist jokes, sexist stereotypes, sexist homophobic stereotypes just fly and you say nothing. Silence is no longer an option. I want people to leave from here and to be empowered to say that I can make a difference. I was talking to one of the participants just a few hours ago, and I looked at him in his youth, this child. I've lived twice his lifetime. And I said to him, you don't have an excuse, because if I can show up day in and day out at my age, you don't have an excuse. So I don't want to hear that you're tired. You just get up and go out and do it. First and foremost, explore your own conditioning. And maybe that conditioning can be done with friends of yours, family members. But I really feel that until you can get in touch with the ways that you have been hurt around racism, and you're going to step out there and go and try to facilitate or get other people to begin a healing process when you're still damaged yourself. Before we ever stepped out there, we worked on ourselves for weeks. And so when we stepped out and invited other people into that space, we felt ready. One of the ways that racism is perpetuated is that hurt people hurt people. So if you haven't worked on your own conditioning and you are still wounded, and then you going out there and trying to help somebody else. Yeah. Do your own work. The people that have participated over the 3 workshops so far seem grateful that somebody showed up to tell them the truth, because I often said, I'm not here to give you fluff. You see, you can get fluff anywhere. I'm not even here to show up looking good. I'm here to show up looking real, and that's a difference. I showed up for the young people of this organization to be able to do my part in passing along the baton. And what I'm hoping, that people will show up at these workshops that's ready to go to work after the workshop is over, to roll up their sleeves and say, yes, I am going to associate myself. I'm going to use my time, my energy, and my resources to help to connect the dots. I want to be a part of that for the greater good, for the city of Chicago, as well as for the world. This is what I want. I've devoted my entire life to this. And the reason that I'm able to get up every single day and hope and pray and wish for one more workshop is because I truly believe that we are not doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. See, I believe that. I believe that if we show up, if we have the conversations, if we roll up our sleeves and run out to do the work, we're not doomed. We have to also look at re-educating ourselves, because a lot of the education that we have received in these institutions have been incomplete, and sometimes I'll say have also been a lie. So I believe we're not doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past.